Yes, I'm curious about what you said earlier, going back and listening to 14th century music. I'd like to know more. Why it was a different chord structures, or did they use a lot of dissonance, or
So
what makes it so pure, like you mentioned?
So they, the biggest thing is modality versus tonality and chromaticity. If you know something about music, that it used to be that the ancient Greeks had this system of modes, and the modes are like these little collections of notes that have like the note you're going to and the note you're coming from and where you want to end it. And like, if you go to very traditional churches, Catholic churches, maybe some other similar, but definitely not Protestant, Anglican, but the more traditional, or synagogues, you still hear that kind of singing. It's like, and it's like, you have like a very limited number of notes, and you have a theory of how they're related to each other. And it's very similar to how we speak, right? We sort of like we go up in pitch when we want to emphasize something, and towards the end of a sentence we go down. If it's a question mark, we will end with an upward. So it's related to our natural, and if you listen to people talking, they will often talk in modes, especially musical people, or people that have developed their voice. Sometimes people just don't have developed voices, so they don't, but our tendency is to talk in limited number of pitches, I think. And so what happened then is that in the medieval, in the Middle Ages, people started thinking about, well, why do we all have to sing the same note all the time? They used to all sing the same note together. You still hear monks doing that in very traditional situations. And so polyphony was born. So one person is holding a note, and do it together. Hold the note. Now we have polyphony. He's singing one note, I'm singing several notes. And then they started, well, maybe we'll sing different notes, maybe we'll move at different speeds and whatnot. And this is how polyphony or counterpoint was created. And for a very long time, all of this happened with very little theory around it. Like they had some theory, but not that much. And they also did not write scores. They would just write these different lines and sing them together. And so the composer would imagine it together and had some ways to think about it. But it was really like, I sing, you sing, oh, let's bring someone else, let's all sing together different things and make them sound good together. They brought in some rhythmic aspect, but they didn't have that many rules about it. And so you get to the high point of this, which is early 15th century, the 1400s. It's so developed that some composers, like Raphel in my mind, were so ingenious at how to use these limited materials available to create phenomenal polyphony that it retains a very natural, it sounds like people are speaking, and yet the combinatorics that they come up with are simply just amazing to the mind. For example, he wrote this entire mass where every single voice, there's another voice singing the same thing at a different speed. Like I'm singing one thing and he's singing the same thing 1.5 times faster, slower. And she's singing something, but she's singing the same thing twice as slow. But together, all the chords make sense to our ear. You're like, how can this possibly be? Right? So I started learning those techniques because obviously there was a mental construct. What happened later, especially after the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, is that rules were started to be put in place. And those rules let composers write music more efficiently, but more standardized. So you start having like the corporatization of music composition with Palestrina. And this is what we still teach in schools, those rules, because someone wrote rules, like let's teach them. And it becomes, and those rules are not bad. You know, Mozart studied these rules, Brahms studied these rules, Raphel, like everyone learned those rules. But as time went by, there were more and more rules, which of course enabled people to use more and more pitches. So now you don't only use the pitches of your mode, or now you don't use mode, you have the major and minor key, but all the major keys can be used, the Bach multiplicator. Suddenly you can use all the major, you can tune it in a way that you can modulate it. There are a lot of advantages to having all these rules. And it develops and develops, and we all study it very intimately to become composers. What I find now is that, yes, I know all that stuff. I'm an expert at that stuff. I've learned, I think, almost everything that is available, but I always look for more in that regard too. But we've lost something with all that system. And that's why I like going back to early Renaissance, late Middle Ages, or folk music. Like, the folk musician has no idea what they're doing in terms of the rules. They're feeling, it's like this musician on a boardwalk sitting and singing a Bob Dylan song. And they're doing things that you can't write down. You can't write it down. And sometimes it's more moving than a huge piece for orchestra. Sometimes it touches us more. Well, why? So I'm very curious about why. And this is what I'm always looking for. Like, why is it that some, completely uneducated musician can come and play something on a guitar or some other instrument, a drum, and at least it's drums. What are they doing with those drums that we don't know? So I'm sort of like, back to the innocence, I'm sort of like trying to get a little bit of that back into music, into my music.
Yes, one last question.
In your process of composing, how much editing do you do? I'm thinking of Beethoven, who sometimes would start over a single note, whereas Mozart would conceive everything and would write it as fast as he could go and make no corrections. What is your process?
Well, I will say about Mozart that it's a bit over mythologized. I've really researched that. And it's a little bit over, like our image is a little bit too skewed, but yes, you do not suffer as much as Beethoven. I have my system, which, from what I've researched, it includes editing, but it's actually closer to the Mozart model than the Beethoven model. I don't have Beethoven sometimes would have 20 versions of the same melody until he found the one he liked the most. I can imagine doing that. I do write it sort of quickly, and then it has to be really, for me, it has to be, really, it gets me the first time that I write it, and then I make it better. It has to be something that I'm like, oh, this is great. But then I don't leave it like that. I always try to elevate it a little higher. For example, I was writing, I actually showed some drafts to a friend when I was doing this, so I was actually aware of this. This happened recently. I rarely do that. I wrote a movement for this oratorio that I'm working on, just for choir. Fairly simple movement. But one of the things that I noticed that I do a lot is I sort of stretch the time. So let's say there's a simple, Schubert, a big fan of this, I think, a simple periodic structure, sort of a question and answer melodic structure, which is very common in music. I will usually stretch the end of the question a little longer than I did originally. So because I really like that moment. I really like the moment that you're like, well, what is going to be the answer, right? Some people always have to have the answer. No. I'm not. I like it. I'm like, is this going to work out? I like this moment because it might not. So I'm sad and happy at the same time. And I'm a little afraid of the answer. So that's something that I do often. I will stretch the moment that you think will not be stretched. The other thing has to do with harmony. Because I'm a big believer in harmony. So I always look for something a little more special. Like this moment. And again, Schubert, I'm studying a big Schubert mass now, so he's on my mind. But Schubert has this, I think, something very unique that, Beethoven, if you were to put the CD on in your house, and for some reason it started in the middle of the piece instead of the beginning, you wouldn't necessarily get the piece. Like Beethoven, you sort of need the whole thing. Right? You need the structure. It's like he takes you on this journey. Right? Da, 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 da. If you didn't hear that at the beginning, would that movement make sense? Right? Schubert is very different. Like you might like start listening to the piece in the very middle. You're like, oh, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. But Raphel is like that too. Raphel, like you don't need the like. Of course, if you heard the beginning, it will have added value. But you're just happy with the moment, and that's the other thing that I really always try to do. That this chord, this chord, this chord. At least now, I'm really focused on that. Like, what would happen if someone came in? Let's say you're sitting in a concert, you're thinking about your day, and then 3 minutes into the piece, you're like, oh wait, I'm in a concert. Let's listen. That happens. Right? I want it to be that moment special enough that you'll be like, oh, I like this piece. And this is something that I really cherish in music, and this is why I think I love Raphel and Schubert. And some composers are just like that. You're like, every moment has like a little bit of enough beauty for you to, or enough expression for you to hang on to it. It's not just this like gigantic art. Of course, that art adds a lot, but those are like two things I do in my process today.
Well, I'd like to say a very special thanks to Avner for joining us. Avner's had an incredibly busy schedule the last few days, just got back from Germany, and we're so happy to have him here with us in Wheeling for these few days. And so I'd like to thank you for sharing with us your thoughts on music and composition.